Lake Ridge was a tiny town in the northern United States, surrounded by dense pine forests and the dark waters of the lake it was named after. For decades, nothing much happened there. People lived quiet lives, worked, fished, and raised their children. But over the past few years, something changed. People started disappearing. There were no witnesses, no signs of struggle. They would simply leave their homes and never return. A young school teacher, a man coming home from work, even a family of 3. Their cars remained untouched, their homes locked from the inside. Some vanished right by the water. Boats were found drifting on the lake, eerily empty. Sheriff James Hope was at a loss. Every investigation led nowhere. He conducted dozens of interrogations, examined countless theories. A serial killer? No evidence. Wild animals? The circumstances were too strange. Suicide? No notes, no bodies. Then, Detective Thomas Reed, a seasoned investigator sent from the state capitol, noticed a disturbing pattern. Each missing person had seen the woman by the water. The first to mention her was George Miller, an old fisherman who had lived in Lake Ridge his entire life. She wasn't normal, he muttered, over a glass of cheap whiskey at the local bar. Too pale, her hair stuck to her face like she'd just climbed out of the water, but there wasn't a drop on her. Others started recalling similar sightings. A woman appearing by the lake on foggy evenings, standing ankle-deep in the water, silently staring at the horizon. Sometimes she would sing, a quiet, haunting lullaby that sent shivers down their spines. Detective Reed didn't believe in ghost stories. He dealt in facts, not superstition. But when he examined the case files and spoke with witnesses, he realized that every missing person had encountered her days before they vanished. And then Miller disappeared too. Deep in the woods near the lake stood an old, decaying house. It had always been there, yet no one knew who had lived in it. Some claimed it had belonged to a witch. Others whispered of a family that had drowned in the lake years ago. Reed and his partner, Sarah Watson, decided to investigate. The door creaked open. Inside, the air was thick with dust, dampness, and decay. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and the wooden floor groaned under their weight. Old photographs lined the walls, yellowed with age, but the faces in the pictures were blurred, as if someone had erased them. "Jesus," Sarah murmured, running a finger over one of the frame. "Does someone still live here?" On the table sat a bowl filled with dark water. When Reed peered into it, he saw something strange. Not the ceiling or walls reflected back, but a face, dark eyes, lips whispering something inaudible. A chill crawled up Reed's spine. "We need to go," he said, grabbing the bowl and sealing it in an evidence bag. But as they stepped outside, the fog thickened, and within it, by the water's edge, she stood. Reed had always been a skeptic. He trusted logic, not legend. But as he faced this thing, an unfamiliar feeling gripped him. Fear. The woman slowly turned to look at him. "What are you doing here?" he asked, forcing his voice to stay steady. She didn't answer. She only smiled, an empty, lifeless smile. And then she vanished into the lake. Sarah gasped. Reed turned, her eyes were wide, her breath coming in short, shallow bursts. She's inside me," Sarah choked out, clutching her throat. Her body trembled violently, doubling over as a guttural sound escaped her lips. Reed lunged toward her, but the moment he touched her shoulder, it stopped. "We need to leave," she whispered. But Reed knew it had already taken her. That night, Sarah disappeared. Reed found her phone by the water, its screen cracked. But one final photo remained, the woman, standing in the lake, but this time, her face was clear. It was Sarah's face. Reed realized this wasn't just a ghost. It was something ancient, something that took bodies as its own, and now it was hunting him. For over a century, the Manor of Blackwood Hollow had stood in eerie silence. Nestled deep within the fog-laden countryside of Vermont, the once grand estate had been abandoned after the infamous Blackwood family vanished without a trace in 1897. The locals whispered about the curse that befell the family, warning anyone who dared approach the rotting mansion. In the present day, historian and skeptic Eleanor Pierce had spent years studying local legend, unraveling fact from fiction. She had heard the tales of Blackwood Hollow, of children who went missing, of voices echoing from its decayed halls, and of strange symbols carved into the manor's walls. Determined to prove the legends wrong, she set off with her colleague, Daniel Graves, a photographer with a fascination for the supernatural. As they approached the towering ruins, the air thickened, as if the house itself was aware of their presence. The wrought iron gates, rusted and bent, creaked as they pushed through. The once manicured garden had been swallowed by nature, with gnarled vines wrapping around the pillars like skeletal fingers. Inside, the manor was frozen in time. Dust blanketed antique furniture, faded portraits stared from the walls, and the air carried the faint scent of decay and candle wax. Daniel set up his camera, snapping photos of the elaborate carvings that adorned the wooden panels. Symbols, intricate, arcane, and unrecognizable, etched into the surfaces like warnings from the past. Eleanor flipped through an old, leather-bound journal found in the study. It belonged to Alistair Blackwood, the last known owner. The entries became erratic toward the end, filled with frantic handwriting and strange symbols matching those on the wall. The whispers grow louder each night. They called to us from the mirrors, beckoning. A chill ran down Eleanor's spine as she turned the page. The ink was smudged as if written in haste. To look is to be taken. To be taken is to be lost. It waits beyond the glass. Daniel, oblivious to Eleanor's growing unease, stood before a massive, ornate mirror covered in grime. He wiped away the dust, revealing their reflection, but something was wrong. His reflection lingered a moment too long after he moved. His breath hitched. "Did you see that?" he whispered. Eleanor looked up, seeing nothing unusual. "See what?" Daniel swallowed hard and shook his head. "Nothing. I think I'm just on edge." They continued exploring. Yet as they walked, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that their reflections in the countless mirrors were subtly different. She dismissed it as paranoia. Hours passed as they documented the manor, but as twilight set in, the air inside grew heavier. Daniel, who had gone to take pictures in another room, hadn't returned. "Daniel?" Eleanor called out, her voice swallowed by the silence. She found his camera on the floor outside the ballroom, its strap torn as if ripped from his neck. The last image displayed on the screen was a distorted reflection of Daniel in a mirror, his mouth open in a silent scream, his hands clawing at something unseen behind the glass. A shudder ran through Eleanor as she turned toward the grand mirror at the end of the hall. It was no longer covered in dust. Instead, it gleamed, pristine and inviting. A faint whisper slithered through the air. Her own reflection blinked when she didn't. Scrambling back to the study, Eleanor frantically flipped through the journal, scanning the last entry. "We should never have looked. The mirrors are the doorways and something is on the other side. It took my wife. It took my children. It will take us all." Terror gripped her as she realized the curse was not just a legend. It was real. The Blackwood family had not they had been taken beyond the glass, trapped in the reflection's cold embrace. A gust of wind blew through the room, and Eleanor looked up. Every mirror in the house now shone clear, and in each one, shadowy figures stood just behind the glass, watching her. Her own reflection suddenly smiled, a sinister, unnatural grin. The last thing she heard was her own voice whispering from the other side, "Now it's your turn." Beth and Jason, a young couple from the United States, are traveling through picturesque Scotland in a rented car. They love adventure and deliberately avoid crowded tourist routes. One evening, as the sun begins to set, they realize they're too far from the nearest town to reach it before dark. Their GPS suggests an inn called the Greystone nearby. As they approach the building, they notice that the inn looks old, with peeling paint on the walls and an overgrown garden. A sign near the entrance reads, "The Greystone Inn, cozy rest in the heart of Scotland." Despite the eerie atmosphere, they decide to stay as they have no other option. Upon entering, they are greeted by the innkeeper, an elderly woman with a cold stare and a strange smile. She introduces herself as Mrs. McGray and offers them a room on the second floor. The lobby is cold, smells damp, and the furniture looks like it hasn't been replaced in decades. On the reception desk, Beth notices an old book filled with handwritten text, but Mrs. McGray quickly closes it when she sees Beth's interest. When they reach their room, Beth and Jason notice oddities. Their reflection in the mirror lags slightly behind their movements, and an antique clock on the wall ticks backward. Jason brushes it off as fatigue and suggests they go to sleep. But during the night, Beth hears whispers coming from the hallway, followed by footsteps pacing back and forth in front of their door. When she opens the door, the corridor is empty. The next morning, Jason is gone. Beth searches the entire inn, but he is nowhere to be found. She goes downstairs to Mrs. McGray, who only shrugs and claims she doesn't know what Beth is talking about. Desperate, Beth returns to their room and finds strange symbols on the wall that weren't there before. The symbols resemble runes and appear to be written in what looks like blood. Beth begins to hear Jason's voice coming from within the wall. She realizes the inn seems to be alive. The walls breathe, the floorboards creak as if someone is walking behind her, though no one is there. She finds the old book she had seen at the reception desk and learns the terrifying truth. The Greystone Inn is an ancient artifact created to lure people in and consume their fear. Beth tries to escape the inn, but the front door is locked. The windows, which earlier appeared broken, are now covered with something that looks like human skin. The voices in the walls grow louder, and among them she can hear Jason screaming. She decides to go down to the basement, where she suspects the source of all the strange occurrences lies. In the basement, Beth finds Jason, but he looks strange. His eyes are empty, and his skin is pale. He tries to hold her, begging her to stay, but Beth realizes this isn't him. It's just an illusion created by the inn. She finds an ancient candle, which, according to the book, is the only way to destroy the inn. Lighting it, she sets the building on fire, which begins to devour everything around her. At the last moment, she manages to run out of the burning building. Behind her, the Greystone Inn emits an otherworldly scream, as if it were a living creature. Looking back, Beth sees the structure vanish into plumes of smoke, leaving only a barren field behind. A few days later, the police find Beth in a state of shock on the side of the road. When she recounts her story, no one believes her. However, she discovers a local newspaper article about the site where the Greystone Inn once stood, which mentions that over a dozen people have disappeared there over the past century. Beth realizes she is one of the few who managed to escape.